If you know, you know. One of us is talking. I don't know who. I'll kick off this one. How's everybody doing? My name is Matt. Sometimes I go by the Grass Factor. It's Thirsty Smurfing Thursday. I think this is going to be our last Thirsty Thursday before we move on to our wet, wild, and wary something on Wednesday. But we're gonna make the transition over to Wednesdays. But we got one more. We have one more to get in here. We saved it. We saved it for this moment right here. We don't just have a guest. We have the guest of guests. We talked a long time ago about him coming on, and I'm sure that we made this guest really nervous with all the chaos and unpredictability that is the show. But you know what? Everybody reaches a moment where they said, I had enough. I'll do it. Let's check it out. Let's see what happens. And so we have brought on John Emerson. Ray, Ryan, everyone say hello to John. UDTurfGuy on Twitter. How the hell are you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We're glad you're here. My favorite part about this is Jay Pink was giving us a rundown in our group chat before we came on. And of course, John had wonderful commentary. He said, number one, I'm more curious about what everyone does on the show, how they got in the business and what they're doing now. I didn't make a list of things to talk about. I just want to wing it. I mean, this literally sounds like we wrote it. It's mind blowing. I can be a little outspoken, especially on Twitter. I certainly do not fall into that category at all. I'm deeply passionate about the industry, whatever the case might be, and I want this industry to persist beyond the time I'm alive. Gosh damn it, if that's not who we can all, I don't know, feel a certain level of brotherhood and camaraderie with, I don't know who else. So, man, I was genuinely super glad you're here. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, not a problem. I'm excited to mix it up, and we can talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, or if somebody in the chat has something to say, I'm an open book, man.
Well, I guess go ahead and bring on our next guest, Ron Henry.
Bring him on.
Maybe he can join us for panel number 5. Can we do a 5-panel with Ron Henry? I would do that. Put him right in the center.
I forgot my thrower down T-shirt.
Oh, no worries.
It's actually at the dry cleaners right now. Damn it.
I'm curious, why turf? How did you get into turf? And then I guess we'll go around and we'll explain how we did. But what was your journey?
So I've got a pretty unique story, I feel like. So I knew I needed to go to college. So I enrolled in college and I had no idea what I was doing. And then I found turf through a friend of a friend, and I enrolled in the turf program, and that's pretty much how that started for me. So kind of the Cliff Notes version of my story is started at the University of Kentucky in their turfgrass program. During the school year, I worked at the Turfgrass Research Farm, which is now defunct, which is completely sad in its own right. I mean, we could talk about the decline in turfgrass programs around the nation if you wanted to, but anyway, so I worked for Dr. AJ Powell and Dr. Tim Phillips and Dr. David Williams during the school year, and then in the summers, I ended up working at the golf course, graduated, and I wanted to be a golf course superintendent. And I started to pursue that career. I went to Valhalla Golf Club, worked there up until the 2008 Ryder Cup. And then a previous assistant superintendent at Valhalla called me, and he was like, hey, you want to work with me? Growing in this new golf course for Fuzzy Zeller up in southern Indiana, which is, if you guys are familiar with Louisville, you go across the bridge in downtown Louisville, and then you're in southern Indiana, right?
Yep.
So it was just like 15 miles over the bridge. So it wasn't very far because I was living close to the University of Louisville, which is pretty close to downtown anyway. So went there. We grew that golf course in, and I was there for some time. And during that time, I started a lawn care business and a consulting type of business. In the consulting, my little niche was I tried to target the local high school, middle school and high school athletic directors and coaches, because they all had pretty crappy fields and no budget to manage it. And I tried to help them do it on a shoestring budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and that went pretty well. And then all of a sudden, I was like, I'm ready to be a superintendent. And if you know anything about golf in Kentucky, there's not a lot of golf courses that are worthy of staying or becoming a superintendent at, but the ones that are really desirable, those jobs are few and far between, and they're really competitive. So I was like, okay, I got to move. And I had a friend of mine who was a superintendent in Northern Virginia, and he turned me on to a job there, and I got the job. But at the same time, I took this job. It was a rehab job. Okay. It was a Gauntlet Golf Club. And I took this job. When I was interviewing with the owners, I said, look, they had aspirations of hosting like a women's event. And I was like, man, we're about $3 million away from that. And, I was like, if you want to get there, I can take you. I can take us there, but you're going to need to invest. And I don't want to come into a position where we just kind of, we're an idle for the next 10 years. Right. And so I took the job with the understanding that, they were going to invest in the golf course and significant portions of money. We're talking about, tree removal, bunker renovations, blah, blah, blah. And so I started, after going into that second year, I started to gather, quotes and whatnot on how much this stuff is going to cost. And then when I took the paper to the meeting, I was like, well, here's what it's going to cost. It's go time if we're going to do this. And then they kind of started, whoa. And at that moment, the writing was on the wall for me. So I was like, I'm not going to stay here and just kind of linger without producing something good out of this place. But let me back up just a little bit. My first call when I moved to Virginia was Mike Goatley at Virginia Tech. I'm familiar with the extension service, and Mike Goatley is the turfgrass extension specialist at Virginia Tech. And so he came to the club and he met me, and we rode around and we talked about some things, and one thing led to another. Dr. Powell, my mentor at UK, was also his PhD mentor. And so he lived in Kentucky for some time, and we really hit it off. And I called him after that meeting with the ownership when they basically said we're not going to invest any money. And I was like, hey, Mike, I'm looking for something else. And he turned me on to Dr. Eric Irvin at University of Delaware, who in turn turned me on to Amy Schober, the extension specialist, looking for a turfgrass guy with the nutrient management program. And I also had the strong desire my entire career to go to graduate school. And so now I'm a turfgrass extension agent. I work with the nutrient management program and the pesticide safety program here at UD, and I'm also a part-time graduate student studying soil testing and turfgrass fertility. If that wasn't long-winded enough for you, I don't know what else is.
It wasn't, because my follow-up is, when was the moment where it clicked and you were like, this isn't just normal. Like I have an obsession with this. And I feel like everybody in front of you has gone through that moment. When was there a precise moment? Did it grow over you over time? But when did it click and you were like, oh, holy shit, this is it?
Well, so that's a good question. So every year, being in the golf course, in the turf management world in Kentucky, Dr. Powell, who was the turfgrass extension specialist for the University of Kentucky, every year they had a multiple continuing education events, right?
Uh-huh.
And I had a good relationship with him. He really liked me. I really liked him. And the rest of the faculty at UK in the plant and soil science department, I knew all of them really well from working out on the farm at the turfgrass farm during the year. But I would run into Dr. Powell and Dr. Williams every winter during the continuing education sessions, and Dr. Powell would be like, "Hey, John, are you ready to go to graduate school? I got some money from the USGA or from USDA to do this XYZ project. It's calling your name, calling your name." I'm like, "Nah, Dr. Powell, thank you, but I want to be a golf course superintendent. I got in this business to accomplish that goal." And I kept telling him no year after year after year. And so that kind of grew on me as I went through my career. And it just ate at me and ate at me and ate at me. And then finally, when I had an opportunity to take this extension role, because I love talking to people about growing grass, and I love making their business more profitable, or their customers more happy, or their membership more happy, or their athletes safer, whatever the case may be. I enjoy that aspect, teaching about turf grass and best management practices and all that stuff. But it was one of those things that just ate at me and ate at me and ate at me. And then the opportunity came for me to work full time and still get paid, even though I took a 50%, well, almost a 50% pay cut to take my job
did.
now. So that was a tough pill to swallow. But so I took the pay cut. I came here, and I was able to go to graduate school for free being an employee. So I killed two birds with one stone coming here. And I'll be completely honest with you, I'm happier than shit. I have never been happier in my entire life at a job. And it's really rewarding, this place. And working at UD has been a blessing, honestly.
DeMay, I'm curious, and Ray, I'm going to ask you too. When was that moment where it clicked with you, and you're like, man, I made the right choice?
Ray, you go first.
When did that click with me? It's hard to say. Hard to say, because I think when I made the right that realization was actually back in 2007. Long after I got out of school, right?
Yep.
And that realization was when I took, projects and jobs and basically turned them around to a degree that isn't typically seen where I'm at without a bulldozer. And this was just via very precise management of water and nutrients, nothing else.
I think
that was my moment.
So I'll give you a second to think a little more, DeMay. Mine was when I was in college, and I got the chance to build Target Golf, and it was for very little money. I didn't realize at the time, but it was a big opportunity. It was an internship, right? And it was going to be, it was 76 acres of wooded area, and it was the guy had plans, and first thing, day number one was he had a big D9 Caterpillar bulldozer dropped off, and he's like, all right, we got to clear these 76 acres, and it was spending every day. And let me give you a little preface to that, is that I was the stereotypical college fuck up, right? Like, drank entirely too much, way too many drugs. And turf grass for me was because I failed as an engineer, right? I thought I was going to be like a software engineer, computer science. My dad is an electrical engineer, so I thought I would like osmotically become that. And then when I realized how much I hated it, I was like, holy shit, I have no future. I am done. And so opted. I had so many math credits. I was like, wow, the way it kind of worked out, I could finish turf pretty quickly. And I was like, well, I'll do that. Plus it made sense to go to summer school too, right? I was like, yeah, now I can super get out fast. And but it was the long days there, and having to not just replicate what you learn in the classroom, but actually apply it to while out in the field, right? So it wasn't just like the labor of chainsawing and praying to God that when you make this last cut, this tree doesn't fall on you. or burying logs alongside Beaver Creek and accidentally knocking a hole in the levee that you built, and it starts filling up with water, and then the panic that sets in. All those little things that you do along the way that as like the week went past back after that, you're like, oh man, that was actually a lot of fun. Or the miles and miles of irrigation pipe you run, and you're growing in Bermuda from sprigs for the first time and thinking it was all dead, and then like a month later you realize that you've got complete and total coverage of grass, and you're like, oh my god, what happened? It was all those little steps, but being able to so focus and dial myself into that one task so obsessively, it was not a job for me. That was my baby, right? And it gave me purpose to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday and have the wherewithal the night before that I should stop drinking at midnight, so at least I can count my ABCs by the time I'm driving to work on Sunday. And and I probably shouldn't admit that. I guess statute of limitations are up since then, but it was little steps of maturity that kind of came a long way. And mind you, I had a lot more maturing to do, a shit ton more maturing to do, but it was that kind of obsession. And then of course 2008 happened. They pulled the plug on that right after we had rounds being played on it, and it was so much fun to watch people play golf and enjoy it. And then when the housing crisis happened, the investor pulled out. They completely shut down the short course, left the golf range open, and I had to figure out what I was going to do. And then I went to work at True Green. And True Green was kind of my second oh shit moment, because I was working with a bunch of guys who were like, it sold like jewelry or cars, or because some were like financial advisors and stuff. And now they had been at True Green for a few months and knew so much more about like why they're applying Simazine and MCPA than I could recall off the top of my head. And I realized, I was like, oh my God, I am so screwed. Like I am not going to make it. Just wigged out. And that forced me that if I'm going to stand out, like degree or not, it just does not matter. The only way that I'm going to stand out in the situation is that if I go harder, faster, and smarter than everyone else I work with, because it's such a big company, it is literally the only way I'm going to stand out. And so that even curtailed my drinking even more. And I had to be put together all the time and be the first one to work and the last one to leave. But it was those little moments you have. And I talk about this all the time, that when you're on a property, especially like a lakefront property on a spring day, the smell is perfect. It's dead silent. All you can hear are birds and nature and bugs. And it just, there is no more perfect anywhere on earth than that one moment that you're experiencing right then. It feeds me so strongly that the rest of the year can be hailstorms and tornadoes and people bitching at me and telling me I'm shit at my job, or call me the lawn boy, which is a huge inferiority complex I have. And it just didn't matter because of those few days you get in the spring where everything is perfect. It is that soul fulfilling, and those few moments that I can tolerate whatever else life has to throw at me. So I don't know. It's kind of me. DeMay, where are you?
I don't know. I think I can think of like four. I always boil this down to like four different things, right? And it's sort of like a hierarchy of not necessarily moments, but like the first. I can remember the very first year working on a golf course when I was going on 13, weed eating trees. That was all I had to do, right? We'd eat 6 holes worth of trees and shit every day, or every third day. And I can remember then finding purpose. What is my purpose for getting up and going to work? And it was, hey, I'm gonna weed eat the trees, right? Like make tall grass short, real simple, right? And didn't matter like what else I had to do, but that was my purpose. I found that and went to work. And then as I stayed there, I can remember being, later on in high school and kind of having confidence, right? That I had a motivation, I had a purpose to be there, but now like I was getting confident that not only could I, take on and master all the tasks that I had, right? But I could also like take on new responsibilities and things like that. And that led to, probably I can remember after an internship that I had, I got to come back to this golf course and work a second year. And literally, I left college. I finished up my 2-year program, went to work at the same place I was at the previous year. The next day, the second assistant quit. Like, just was up like double deuces, walks out the door, and is like, "I'm out of here. I'm done." And they looked at me and they said, "Hey, we don't know a title, a role, anything like that, but can you figure out our spray program and run our spray program on these 38 acres of bent grass fairways and 6 acres of bent grass greens and approaches and 5 acres of tees?" And I'm like, "We'll figure it out. Let's go." And at that point was taking ownership
thinking about it.
No, it doesn't. It didn't at all, though. That's the weird part. Like, I had that confidence that, all right, I've got a skill set, I've got a knowledge base, right, that I've gotten from school and from my previous jobs and things like that. And it's been just about that, just taking ownership of every situation. The last part, though, that I think that is the aha moment is a little bit later on. I'm probably in my early to mid 20s, get my first superintendent's job at a pretty young age, and the whole thing there was making others better, right? So through that purpose and through that confidence that had been instilled in me to continue to try and do new things and take ownership of every situation or obstacle was in my way or whatever, it was taking all those things and helping other people, right? So the guy who's mowing greens, or when I got into sports fields, the guy who was dragging infields, whatever the case was, right, to help that person and anybody else be better. If I could do that through what I'd learned, what I'd experienced, and what I was taught, and all those kind of things, then that's kind of the highest form of leadership in any profession, is if you're doing it so well that you can make others around you better. And so, I don't know.
I agree.
There's a lot of ways that you can slice and dice how you got there. And I think if you are one of those people that assigns blame, like, "Oh, I wish I should have," the Al Bundys of the world that want to tell you how good they were a football player they were back at Polk High. Living in the past, your best days are gone by, and that's a problem. I always look for the people that are excited about today, because today could be the best day. It could be a really fucking shitty day, but you know what? That's the way it rolls, and if you're excited about today, that means you're in the right mindset. And that's a good litmus test, I think, for anybody that you go and meet and talk to in this business or outside of this business.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
I agree.
I totally agree.
I want to amend my answer a little bit. I think
he was inspired.
Yeah, well, I think I maybe misunderstood the question at first, but now obviously after listening to you all talk, I understand what you were getting at. But the first day when I knew that turf was my thing, was my calling, I was the first time, not the first time I've been on a golf course, because I've been on many golf courses. I played golf since I was 10 or 11 years old. But the first time I went to the University of Kentucky's Turfgrass Research Farm and saw 30 acres of putting greens and in-tep trials and fine fescue, every single type of grass under the sun, they were growing and doing some kind of research on. I knew that I wanted to be involved in that in some form or capacity. That was the moment. And I thought that was the coolest damn thing I ever seen.
I can remember walking out on the first really nice golf course. Same as you, John. I played golf from an early age and started working on one when I was 12, 13. But I can remember the first really nice one I went out when I was probably 18 years old, right when I was thinking about going to turf school. And, I'll tell you what, it's hard to swing a golf club 90 or more times with a raging hard on the entire time. I can assure you of that. It's very difficult. I made it through.
What course was it? Do you remember?
I do remember. It was actually that place I went back and worked. So it was interesting. It was Avalon Lakes Golf Club in Warren, Ohio, Northeast Ohio. It's Pete Dye design. he had just done this massive renovation on it, about $8 million, which at that time was a lot of money to put into a golf course. And everything was just prim, proper, perfect. Well, very manicured to a T and everything like that. So the funny part is I went there, I had that raging heart on, and then I got top 100 syndrome and thought I was going to go someplace even flashier and everything like that. And had an internship that didn't work out. And lo and behold, came full circle back there and everything worked out. It was kind of cool. But no, I think I've told this. This is a stupid story, but it's a quick aside. The guy that was there had been there since the inception of the golf course. Helped build the golf course, became the superintendent. Had been there at that point, something like 35 years or about a little over 35 years. So anyway,
you don't see that anymore.
You don't see that anymore. And at the time, like the guy was a ghost because they were, starting to buy up other golf properties and do all this stuff. So when you see him, though, he's the nicest guy you'd ever meet, and he would just give you these real quick one-liners or quick stories or anecdotes or things like that. So I know I've told the story of the program before, but I'll tell it to you. Is I had to present a project, right, for my internship at Ohio State to him, and say, hey, can we do this project? And here's a formulated plan, everything like that. See this really small nursery green that was probably no more than like 1,000 square feet, probably even a little bit less. And I always thought, I was like, God, that's so small. Like if something bad happens, like we're screwed. So I make this big plan up. I this is my dawn of PowerPoint, everything like that. Make this big PowerPoint up, budget, how we're going to execute the project, how long it's going to take, equipment we'll need, like everything. And I present it to him, and he sat there the entire time, intently listened, everything like that. Got to the end, and he said, Ryan, I just want to tell you something. That was one of the most well thought out and delivered presentations I've ever seen from somebody your age. I want to commend you. And I also need to tell you something really important. And I said, okay, what's that? I said, well, that nursery serves as a reminder of something that's very important to me. And I said, well, what is it a reminder of? So that's a reminder of that's the last 1,000 square feet between me and a new job. So if I needed any more bent grass than that, I won't have to worry about it because it won't be my fucking problem. Lesson learned. And after that, we didn't do anything to the nursery, and he gave me an A, and we got on from there. But just having people like that in your life to be able to not just say, "Oh, shut the hell up" or anything like that, but he allowed me to get better, but also gave me the harsh reality of what life is like in his seat. So props to him.
Oh, absolutely.
John,
I mean, that is
go ahead,
most that is the most pertinent and relevant thing, and this is the point that I always try to make to a lot of people, is that 1,000 or a couple thousand square feet is the only thing between you and looking for another job. And by the way, guys, that is my reality 52 weeks out of the year. Okay,
you're around, baby.
That's my reality.
Got to have something to keep you humble, and driving by the bent grass nursery 6 times a day will do that. I learned that in 2003.
John, nutrient management. All right, so especially when I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to skip ahead to today's times, right? So I was not. I guess for the last, in my entire career has been in lawn care, right? No, I'm on the manufacturing side of things, and I didn't really start getting into the social media thing, even though I'm a millennial, probably till like 6 years ago, something like that. And it was then that I became more in tune with what other LCOs were doing. And I noticed that a lot of it was just what they picked up from where they worked prior, right? So when I worked at TruGreen, we did things a very specific way, right? You come in the afternoon, you pump into your tank, whatever was in the big mixing tank, and you went and sprayed and prayed the next day, right? And you kind of did what you did, except for when summer rolled around, and then you had a spreader, and you typically had 2 things that you could pull from. It would be like, a 3300. I'm sorry, it'd be like ammonium nitrate, and you were only allowed to carry like 5-6 bags. And then the rest of it would be like a 3300 or a 3303 or whatever they could get, blended the absolute cheapest from whatever co-op around America that they could. So that was what you did. And then when I went to work for another company called Fairway Lawns, they gave us a lot more control over what we did, and passed more of that onus of responsibility onto us as applicators, that if you felt like a different direction needed to go on a property, you could make that as long as it was within inventory, right? And they weren't going to go buy truckloads of material to fulfill whatever itch you had. But if you wanted to try something new, they would give you the flexibility to do that. And I always thought that was pretty cool, and it kind of challenged me and my other coworkers to learn more, right? Because we did have that flexibility. Let me ask, from your standpoint now, especially being on the extension side of things, and like you said, I know you like to give more passionate thoughts on Twitter. The direction as an industry of where we're going, especially in LCOs that you deal with, do you think there are steps towards improvement? Is it stagnant, or are we going backwards in terms of what we are doing fertility wise?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be a state by state deal, right? So here in Delaware, there's a blackout period from December 15th to February, or December 7th to February 15th.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
It makes sense. Well, I'll put it to you like this: it makes sense for agricultural production. It does not make sense for lawn care, for the turf grass industry as a whole. The time of the year where you have the largest nutrient losses is from the mid-November until the end of February. But we still allow lawn care operators to apply nutrients during those windows of where nutrient losses are the greatest. In my opinion, you should only be able to apply nutrients or nitrogen and phosphorus, because those are the only ones that really matter, right, for water quality. I think in our part of the world, in Delaware, in the Mid-Atlantic, you should not be able to apply fertilizer from, or your window for application is going to be March 1st to November 15th. Anytime after that, the only time you should be allowed to apply nitrogen is going to be maybe with, you're doing some kind of late seeding or a late sodding event. That's what I think. Because here's the thing, it's gotten so bad with the lawn care operators that as soon as that February 15th date hits, they are out the door. And if you are familiar with the weather here in Delaware, I mean, it's freezing cold in February 15th. Yeah. Average daily temperature is probably, it's probably in the low 40s, maybe even upper 30s. And so I think state by state, or the states that have nutrient management regulations, I think a lot of them piggyback off agricultural operations. Okay. We need ag, right? We have to eat.
Yeah.
But I think we can do a better part as an industry to follow these best management practices. And when I say that, I wish that we could have separate nutrient management laws for the turf and ornamental industry, and then whatever the ag folks decide. I'm not an ag guy. I'll be honest with you, but I know that agricultural sector takes precedent over just about anything because again, we have to eat. But my 2 cents is that I don't think we're going in reverse, so to speak, but I think there's definitely room for improvement, and I don't know if that's via education or if that's via regulation. I'm not sure, but I've asked other people who have been in the industry much longer than me, in academic and extension roles, and they all say the same thing. The only answer to fix this problem is through regulation. And that's kind of how I see it. But that's if we're going to stop people from applying nitrogen and phosphorus when the plants are completely dormant or asleep, I think that's the only option. But I don't know. I'm open to listen to anybody else's opinion on how to improve the efficiency of fertilizer applications or timings, but it seems to me to be the only answer at the moment.
Well,
What
I'll
do you all
say
think?
this. So purely from a business related perspective, like what I think about is that why are they so desperate to get out February 15th? And it's due to cash flow, right? Are
Right.
are there ways to structure their business to generate revenue during the off season? And I think if that was more accessible or talked about, it would be easier to adopt to allow later start dates on fertility applications. So, for example, and I know this is going to sound controversial, but we can do this in a couple different ways. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all approach. Number one is, especially if you were in an area with low pH soil, lime is your friend because you can certainly put that down when it's cool outside, right? No issues there whatsoever. You don't need actively growing turf. It's not like all your lime is going to instantaneously dissolve and leach through your soil colloid in a week, right? Another thing too is soil testing, and why I say it's controversial is that do you need to perform a soil test every year? I 100% do not think that is necessary, even in the slightest. However,
I agree with you.
We have two different aspects of lawn care, right? Do I think it's important that if you're walking onto a property for the first time and you do not know shit about that property, in my opinion, why it makes sense to go ahead and soil test is that if you can identify an anomaly from the get-go, you can go ahead and be corrective proactively rather than wait and let the customer tell you 6 weeks after the fact, I don't know what you did when you were last here, but it didn't do shit. In fact, it looks worse than when you started, right? And the number of times that the customer has to notify you that something didn't work, the more doubt you're going to put into their head, and they're going to be more likely to cancel immediately from the get go, right? So, failure of application results is almost an immediate termination. And if it doesn't happen the first time, it casts the seed of doubt when it's later to it's more likely to show up earlier into your relationship. So, even though it isn't likely to identify problems 99% of the time, but especially if it's a new property to you, establish some sort of baseline. And the other thing too is that can be when it's cooler outside. I know people are going to say, "Well, you're supposed to do it when soil temperatures are above 50 degrees or whatever." And if you're trying to get accurate organic matter readings and that, yeah, but if you're looking for P and K and pH, I don't think you're going to see that wild of a swing because you pulled it when soil temps were 37 versus 50 degrees. And those are two billable applications when it's cool outside that allow for a revenue stream that you otherwise would not have, therefore buying you time from a cash flow perspective to start later in the season, right? And I'll say right now that regulation always freaks me out, and so my gut reaction is always but and however
Me too.
I think it does make sense that if regulation is the route that goes, I think the other piece of that to make it more palatable or tolerable is some sort of revenue generating alternative that can occur across that time period, so people aren't freaking out. How am I going to cover 3 months of no revenue and still retain employees over that time period and so on and so forth, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I've given a couple seminars on this, and so one thing that I think kind of gets lost in the mix, or a lot of times people don't think about, is like, okay, so if you can by law go out on February 15th and apply fertilizer, and the people, the homeowners and business owners who are your clients, they want to see you out there, right? Why can't you go out with the 007?
Another great point.
Why does it need to be nitrogen and phosphorus? And that's point number one. Yep. Point number two is the individual that starts a yearly soil testing program, because most lawn care operators that I know, not all of them, but most of them, do every 3 to 5 years, right? For soil testing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you can make this an offering as part of your business. You can charge somebody $40, $50, $60 to come out and take a soil sample. And it's going to cost you $15. And I was like, you can make this a part of an offering. And if you want to take it even a step further to set yourself out from the crowd, learn how to take those results from your soil tests every year and put it into a Excel graph, which is super simple. And if you can present your client, say, okay, so this is your pH last year, and this is where it's going. You can track the trends of all the nutrients, the standard analysis package that come with a soil test. You can track all of those stuffs in a cool looking graph that is super simple. It's a few clicks and a few copy and paste. And you can present this to your clients and say, hey, look, this is a value added thing that I'm giving to you. So you're getting soil testing, plus you're seeing visually what is happening in regards to what I'm actually doing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That does, John. That does.
There should be software for that.
But
intent.
This is where, that rush to get out. I have kind of identified the cause of that. And you know what the cause of that is? People
keeping up with the Joneses.
No, John. Okay, I'm going to flip your mind. The reason for this is that people are equating applications or whatever's done to their lawn and not equating, I am paying these people to keep my grass in healthy condition, because this is where I set myself apart. You're not paying me per mowing. You're not paying me per application. You're paying me because I know what the hell is going on with your lawn. And if you think you need somebody to pay per application, get bent. Aloha. Bye.
Yeah. The business model in and of itself, again, True Green set the stage, right? And everyone models the entire LCO service industry off of that mindset, right? You have a program, it's a certain number of applications a year. This is what it's going to cost per application, or I could do levelized billing and it'll be this over the month. And then I have these programs that I upsell based on certain conditions that I face while I'm out there. Or you can have a total package that includes it all. And I get it. And I do think there's plenty of validity in that business model, and people can do a good job under that structure. But at the same time, too, again, if you're an expert, you can also market yourself as an expert, in that you are paying me a consulting fee for me to take care of whatever it is I need to take care of throughout the course of the year. And so it's going to be difficult for me to tell you how many times I'm going to be here. The caveat is that if you miss, if that is your business model, and you do miss something that ends up happening negatively, and Ray, I know how ornery and exact you are. You have the level of precision as a CNC machine, right? So I know this doesn't apply to you. However, I'm talking to the rest of the listeners right now, that if you do adopt that business model and you do fuck up, I am the king of killing grass. I promise I've killed more acres of turf grass than anyone listening right now accidentally killed more. And my point being is that is what you cannot afford to do if that is your business model, because your reputation will be ruined instantaneously. You get a bit more grace on a set number of applications per year. And the other thing too is that I also feels like it's easier to keep your business in check that way. You have plenty of tools to help you stay organized, that I know I need to get everyone done in this window of time, and then I need to go back and get everyone done in this window of time. And it kind of burns into your brain that way. You build your lifestyle around it. And I think because it's so familiar, and so many people that do go into business for themselves previously worked at another lawn care company, that it's hard to break yourself of that mindset, like Ray has, of saying, no, it's going to cost this much per year, and I can't tell you how many times I'm going to be here. But what I can guarantee is that you're always going to have an exceptional property. You're not going to lose a certain amount of grass that's not going to be repairable within X number of time frame, or however you market yourself in that way. I can't even do it.
You're not going to lose. You're not going to lose grass, and I think that the whole point is that this is very, I understand, market dependent, because you know what would happen if in my market I told somebody, oh, I'm going to do this X number of times per year, right? You're going to pay this much. And then that's it. And just so happens, due to circumstances beyond their control, beyond my control, there's an issue. I still don't have any grace. I am still responsible, irregardless. So I think that too is where I'm listening to this thing where, I can just apply this so many times per year and I'm free of responsibility after that. No, it doesn't work that way. Because do you know what happens when something does F up? Even though you did what you said you were going to do, you are still held responsible to deal with any problems that come up anyway. You're not off the hook.
It's true.
You're still responsible. You're still responsible. So as a result, I guess I've had to adopt an entirely different approach to turfgrass management. Totally different. Because I often tell people, my goodness, I think I would actually be a nicer person if I dealt with turfgrass in the continental United States. I'd be a much nicer guy.
Not too many lawn care guys are real mowing every one of their properties between a tenth and a half an inch spray. So kudos to you, especially your Zoysia yards, which are my favorite, but it is what it is. Speaking of golf courses that changed my life, the first time I played Cherokee Valley in North Mississippi had Zoysia fairways, and I grew up on Audubon, which was a public golf course, and we had Dallas grass fairways. And man, when I hit off that Zoysia fairway, I exactly like you said, all 183 strokes I took that day on the front nine, boy, was I could not walk. I had a tripod going. It was terrible. Anyway, all right, John.
The ball is on a tee.
All the time. It's unbelievable. I could hit a 3-wood for the first time in my life. This is amazing. What are as especially on the extension side of things, what are the biggest mistakes you see people making right now? And I know you're on the regulatory side too. What are the most common mistakes from LCOs? And especially if you can think of one that you would be aware of, as people aren't even aware they're making this mistake.
Wow. I would say calibrating their equipment properly, or at least more than once every 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to stress the importance of calibration, but I also don't want to burden turfgrass managers with the idea that you need to calibrate every week or every month. But if you can calibrate, anytime you're switching products, you probably need to calibrate, right? Or I'm talking about granular application here.
Sure.
And when we talk about foliar applications of products, I think once a year is the absolute minimum. And especially if you're using that to spray fertilizers, to spray pesticides, those nozzle tips can degrade quite rapidly, especially if you're you have quite a bit of land to cover and you have a big customer base. I think that's probably the whole calibration a little more frequently. That'd probably be one of the bigger issues, because I always tell people this. I say, hey, look, today it's not going to matter if your calibration is off 5 or 10, 15%, up less or more. Let's say you're applying 10% more than you actually have to, or you're actually supposed to. It's not going to be significant today, but if you multiply that up over 100 properties, 6 applications over the year, that's some serious change. So I think you have to put that financial incentive on why calibration is important.
When you treat a 5,000 square foot lawn and you realize you spread an entire bag of fertilizer, and you're like, I make $50 on this lawn and I just spread 29 of it with that one bag of fertilizer. Like that is not good.
Want it to come back next year, though.
Yeah, that just leads me to my other. Yeah.
DeMay has a sheet for us to take a look at here. What do you got here, DeMay? I see you creeping.
This is we covered this, and I'm sorry for being silent. I was looking for this paper, and I wanted to see. And this isn't a gotcha at all. This is talking about kind of going back to our discussion about fertilizer bans, blackouts, things like this. So slide down here, J-Pink. This is a paper here from 2023, John. And one of the things, keep going down here. Let me see if I can find the page here. Bear with me here. They were looking at runoff in lawn situations and, kind of micro watersheds that exist in subdivisions and things like that. But if you scroll down to, this would be page 5, J-Pink. And we're going to look at the paragraph here on the right-hand side. So the lack of environmental knowledge included information specific to lawns. Push-to-web surveys revealed that only 21.3% of homeowners out of a null of 3,836 households have had a soil test to determine if their lawns have excessive levels of nutrients. This is in Maryland that they're doing this, right? Let's see here. The Maryland fertilizer law has requirements for residential fertile application rates, but only 69% of surveyed homeowners were not at all aware of the statewide law implemented a decade ago. Another 7.9% of respondents left this question blank. Only 2.7% indicated that they were highly aware of the law. So, again, this is a question like it's sort of the chicken or the egg, right, John? Is education or legislation and regulation, right? And if we can't educate the people on what the laws are, then who gives a damn what they are in the first place, right? Like, so
from an extension standpoint,
from an extension standpoint, what do you think if you were the president of Turfgrass Extension in the United States, let's say,
what a job, by the way.
What are some it would be a great job. What are some practical, no bullshit things that you would implement right away to say, guys, the fact sheets are great, but we're not reaching the people we need to reach? How, and there's no right or wrong answer here. How would you go about getting that number flipped around to where 70+% of people knew about the law?
Yeah, and speaking, so that information is for homeowners that do their own lawn care. Is that what
I believe so?
Right,
yes, and I'll send you this. I will send you this paper. But yeah, I'm just using it to kind of highlight the point that I think that we got to get back to better education. We got to get back to better extension, and that's no indictment of extension agents. I think that is on land grants and the people higher up within your administration departments that are not exactly supportive of extension efforts, and particularly turfgrass extension efforts.
Yeah, however, that's such a tough question.
These same, lawmakers, anytime there's a problem, quick, easy button answer is, oh, let's ban it all. All right? When, in fact, this paper raised an important point. How many consumers are even aware? And, I have this thought where I know how to make these consumers aware. And this is going to seem rather draconian, but
it's going to cut their hands off.
Nobody buys shit unless they can pass a state certification. Thank you. Yes, John. And you know what? I'm not talking about the commercial applicators either. I'm talking about all of these consumers that right now they can buy as much nitrogen as much whatever and apply as much of that as they want, yet they keep on picking on the commercial applicators, saying that we're the problem. No, we are not the problem, because to us, if we screw around, if we're lax, or if we misuse our waste product, that comes out of our pockets. That's money out of our bank accounts. But then with these homeowners, a lot of them, they just don't care. I mean, they really don't care. It's like they say, damn it, I'm going to have the greenest lawn on this street, and I don't care about what even the bag says. I'm just going to keep on throwing her down until the grass is green.
I keep applying iron, and my lawn isn't getting any greener. I do not understand. Clearly, there's a problem with the iron that I'm applying. I should apply this other iron and more of it.
No, I think there's something to that, right? Because I can't tell you how many LCOs have told me, John, I did this program, and then I look over it and it looks great and it looks like it's going to work well, and you expect it to work well, and then they're applying 2.5, 3 pounds of nitrogen per year. Everything looks good. BMPs are being followed, right? And then you have Joe Billy, who comes back over top of them when they leave and applies a pound of ammonium sulfate or urea right over top of that.
Right on top.
I forgot that used to happen. Hell yeah, it does.
I mean, that is common, very, very, very common. I don't know how it is for you all.
I gotta kind of add to that. No, I gotta add to that because I actually have a policy regarding that. You know, John, I got a policy.
Good for you.
And that is, if I find out that anything other than water has been applied to a lawn that I manage, guess what happens?
Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Yeah,
right.
I'll say that when I was self-employed as an LCO, like it was, I mean, there was no room for that, and especially as I became more jaded and ornery too, I would just drop someone instantaneously. But when I was in corporate lawn care, that was common. That was really common, and there would be a lot of times where I could not figure out how in God's green earth, 6 weeks after my last application, it was clear that this thing was just exploding out of the ground. And I mean, there would be a couple times where I'd be like, man, I am the best fertilizer applicator in all of America. Yeah. And then come to find out, every 2 weeks, old boy is literally, hammering it with Scots in between what I'm doing. And then, one, gut check, but two, I forgot all about that. When I was in corporate lawn care, that was a very common thing.
I don't know.
And here's the other thing, guys, is that this is where I think other piece of this is that we got to ask ourselves, now, why are these people applying even more stuff? Because, in my flow or thought process, here's my expectation. I expect a very good response from a minimal amount of nitrogen, right? I expect a very good response. And if I don't get that very good response, I then start to drill down and ask, why is this grass not green on 0.2 pounds of N? I ask the question, and I want a good answer for it. I just ask the question, whereas I think industry-wide, what I see is people are doing nitrogen, and more nitrogen, and they're not asking themselves, or they're not being asked, why isn't the grass getting green on this nitrogen application? Their answer is, rather than find out why, they keep applying more until it does turn green. Okay, I mean,
50% of all political donations go to land grant universities. How about that? That is just a written, that becomes a new law. If you any kind of fundraising related to politics, 50%
extension services
goes to the extension. Community outreach.
What's
the extension service?
What do you think? What do you think the overhead's going to be on the first billion, John?
Oh God, I didn't think about that.
68%. Well, that's standard.
Oh Lord.
Hey, everybody gets their cut. We'll make it. We'll have to make it a restricted gift.
Little,
you know.
I have a little local anecdote. So there's been some
Sure.
talk around Delaware about exactly what Ray was talking about.
Okay.
But here's the problem. So if we have about 1 million people in Delaware, okay? If something like that were to pass, where in order for a homeowner or Joe Billy or Jill Billy wants to buy fertilizer, they have to present their certificate of completing a nutrient management, a basic intro to nutrient management course, right? So who provides, okay, and about 30% of the population in Delaware owns a home. So that puts us at about 300,000 homeowners. Who in the hell is going to educate 300,000 homeowners? Who's going to do that? Like, where do you get
I have
the
I have the answer for
It's
that.
got to be asymmetric. It's got to be online. It's got to be. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I have the answer for that is that anybody that wants to continue applying, they're going to figure out how to get that certification and how to get the education to get that certification, because what I see happening is that a lot of people have already educated themselves enough to have the wherewithal to go out and buy fertilizers. And
No, I don't know. Ray, I think you're kind of jaded by our community. The homeowners in our community are really, really extra. Again, most of these guys have real mowers and are doing really insane shit on their yards. But I think the average person that's just walking into Home Depot and spends 10 minutes looking at the different fertilizers. There was a time that I would talk to those people. I do not do that anymore because I value my sanity a little bit more.
Your sanity.
And it was fascinating. It was fascinating the things people would tell you. And then when they clearly had zero interest in any sort of advice you would say, even if you said, yeah, I have a turf grass degree, blah, 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 I have a business, but just no interest at all. Which is, well, let me tell you, grandma told me that when the moles are real bad, you double down on lime. You're like, the fuck did you just say to me? Are you, huh? And then, just 100% do not want to hear it because Mama told them what needs to be done, and you're getting in my way. Get the fuck out of here, lawn boy. And then again, my inferiority complex kicks in, and I wig out and cry. But, I think the average person is of that mindset, right? And if they are into their lawn, the average person it's a hand-me-down type thing, the way they were taught by Papa or Mama or Dad or Mom, and so they kind of carried on that way. Like when I ran around in Mississippi, if you did not apply ammonium nitrate, they would act like you're not fertilizing the lawn. It does not matter what it was that you were applying. If said, nope, it's got to be ammonium nitrate, or you're not putting shit out here. And then it's the same people that would spray their dormant Bermuda with diesel fuel in the winter. I mean, it was what you did. You sprayed diesel in the winter, and it was insane. It's like, why do you have a lawn service if you're going to be spraying diesel in the fucking? Why are you spraying fucking diesel in your yard to begin with, right? But point being is that I think that's average. I think that is average. And if what kind of pushback occurs when you start saying those people have to have a license? I think that, I don't know. I feel like that is going to create an absolute shitstorm of chaos. How do you deal with that?
It will.
Think about it
cause
politically.
chaos.
Oh, politically, it's a poison pill.
Yes,
it's a poison pill. However, but here's the thing: is that without this, some kind of break on the misapplications, the regulations are going to happen whether we like them or not, and they're going to be in such a way that, again, somehow, some way, those regulations always give a pass to these individuals that go out and do what they want to their own property, but the problem falls on the commercial applicators who are monitored by the state.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
we get the shit. We get the shit because the consumer is misusing products. We get the crap.
Yeah.
And I see that. Here's the thing that I've been told about, for example, Europe. As much as a hard time they give the farmers in Europe, my understanding is that, in Europe, you cannot buy or apply anything. Nothing. So to me, that seems like, yeah, that sounds about right. But then here in the United States, it's reversed in that, the homeowner can go out and apply Scots every 2 weeks and double down or triple down on his herbicides. No big deal. But then it's the commercial applicators that are being audited by the state inspectors regarding their fertilizer and pesticide usage. So, but then at the same, and here's the thing is that how many lawns are actually treated by commercial applicators versus the lawns that are DIY, right, John? Totally DIY, off the books, as I like to call them, because those jokers don't get audited by the state environmental department every year. They don't. We do.
This is such a complex issue to try and solve. I mean, like, I don't have an answer. I have some, I feel like if we're really going to address this, then honestly, I'm not saying that this is the right answer, but the only way to address these water quality concerns is going to be through regulation, because people aren't going to voluntarily do this. If they say, because here you're going to end up fighting Home Depot and Lowe's, say, hey, well, you can't sell our fertilizers anymore. So you're going to have to fight big corporations. I mean, it can tumble out of control really quickly where you're up against,
however,
a hard place.
However, John, I see it tumbling out of control the other way around, in that on a national level, all of this just gets shut down. And I can see that
it's not gonna
happening.
Happen.
No, I see it happening, guys. I honestly see it happening because I see it in our political climate such that we are regulation hungry. We are literally regulation hungry in the United States. There is a segment of the population that has the majority of votes that just eats this kind of stuff up. And, there's people where they think, oh, a ban. Yes, that'll fix it. That'll fix it. And these same people, they're also sort of short-sighted that they don't see the unintended consequences of all of their bans. But yet at the same time, they're more than happy to pressure their lawmakers into enacting these bans. Because, by the way, I
don't know how that'll ever pass, because last I checked, like, if you were to just shut down the turfgrass industry today, I think you would be shutting down. I don't quote me on this figure, but I think in this paper that I read a few months ago, I believe the total value in like 2008 or 2009 of the turfgrass management industry was somewhere of like 150 billion or 200 billion dollars.
Yeah.
And if you take that 250 billion dollars out of the economy, boy, that's going to be a big hit. I mean, that's a big hit to the economy.
It's
so I don't think
that's a hit. However, here's the thing is that I don't think that's going to be as much of a hit, because what's going to happen is basically you take away all of these products and materials, and people are going to be basically forced to maintain garbage. And the reason why I say that is possible is because I know that scenario. I understand that scenario, okay, John? I understand that scenario extremely well. So I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility because you know what, RD? Here's what can happen. You're going to be tasked with maintaining sports fields that consist nothing but hacked down weeds.
I don't know. All right. So here's my question for John is, all right.
Yeah.
Last question on consumer behavior. What is since your time at UD, right? You've kind of gone through this this golf phase. You've been in research before, you kind of get back into it. What has been the best thing that you've seen and the worst thing that you've seen in terms of consumer behavior? And I don't care if that's in the pro market or in the DIY market. I'm just curious of like, now you have this different lens that you look through. So what do you look at and be like, hey, that's encouraging, I feel good about that? And then what do you look at and be like, oh man, we got a long way to go? You see examples of that in your day to day or on the internet or things like that? Things that give you hope or things that bring you fear?
No, I'm pretty hopeful because I think there's a lot of good research going on, and I still think that there's value in the extension services to get this research out to the people. And knowledge is power, and so even though a lot of the turfgrass programs have fallen under the knife in the past 15 or 20 years, I still think that there's a lot of people out there doing really good work and trying to extend that knowledge to the people.
So on that note, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
On the bad side of that, I think that the industry as a whole, the turfgrass industry as a whole, has a, how do I say this? Has a bad reputation in the general public's eye. Okay. I was in the golf course bubble forever for the last 17 years, and everybody that I interact with loves grass, right? But if you step up, coming into academia and working in extension and in the land grant system, there are a lot of people that would love nothing more than to bury all turfgrass management schemes and systems. So I think we as educators could probably do better, but at the same time, when our funds get cut, it makes it difficult. But I'm positive. We just need to keep following best management practices. If that's all in a nutshell, that's what my job is I preach best management practices for fertilizer and pesticide application. And I feel like I feel like I've done a good job with that with the small state that I'm in. But there's always more that can be done. You guys know. There's always.
You did do a great job. If I managed to find you on Twitter and see what you put on it, and I'm sure you have your own opinion of what you do on Twitter, but when I read it and I'm like, fuck yeah, I like that guy. You're doing great, right?
I mean, I'm trying, man. Here's the thing that kind of, like I said, I love my job. I love the people I work with. I love the university. But I am literally so Dr. Eric Irvin is the department chair, the plant and soil science department chair. And he was a longtime Virginia Tech guy. I mean, he's a well-known turfgrass physiologist, right?
Yep.
And me and him, but he's the department chair. And if you are familiar with academia, the department chair is an administrator, right? And he's getting a little older, so he's on the tail end of his career. And so he's more in the administrative role. And unfortunately, I feel like me and him are the only turfgrass mouthpieces at the university. And so, like, I'm kind of a one-man show.
Damn.
And, that's not to say that everybody hates turf, because there's a lot of people that at the university that do a great job. And
all right, if you had to put a percentage on it, what percentage is what's the word I'm looking for? Is either pro turf or apathetic towards turf versus how many people who are like, get it off the face of the fucking planet?
within the university system at Delaware, or just the general public?
We'll start in academia and then go to general public.
And you can be broad in academia. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Maybe not even your school, but at least what you've experienced over your career.
I don't know. That's such a tough question to put a number on, because again, there's a lot of people that have an affinity for turf, and they want their home lawns to look well, and but
however,
there are.
John,
I don't want to name names. I don't want to get myself in trouble. Start naming names.
No,
don't need to name names.
Yeah.
But
don't do that.
But then here's what I'm going to put it to you. How many people, that you've encountered in academia have that anti-turf, let it go back to nature mentality?
How many people?
I mean, that's what we're trying to deduce.
Yeah. How many people are like that? Because
if I had to put it, just putting a wild ballpark number on it.
Yeah, just spitball
it. I would say 25 or 30%, or if not more.
Okay.
And I will say that is not as bad as I thought you were going to say, which in my opinion is good.
But here's the thing.
Good, but
those
then
people are extremely loud. Those people are
this is true.
Bullhorn.
They're vocal.
One of my favorite things to do is to get on Google and just type in lawns in America and look at the most reputable publications at the articles they have published on that. And every one of them are rooted in white supremacy, colonialism, environmental harm, impending doom, gloom. I mean, it's nuts what you read. You're like, is this fucking real? Like, where am I? Do I live in clown world? And feel free to, while you're in front of your computer, to type in lawns in America. Scientific American has an entire article about it. And I'm like, this can't be happening. I love science. Don't do this to me.
Yeah.
And not only that,
I mean, something to that.
My fear is that these people are the people that have the most political power. They may not necessarily be in the majority, but then they have the most political power, because unfortunately this is ruled by the vocal minorities, right? So these guys, they say no more lawns, they're bad for the environment, they're polluting, they represent white supremacy. And so you know what happens within academia even? That is why turfgrass programs, for example, are not strongly supported, because the administrators above your administrator have to listen to these people saying, maintain turf represents white supremacy and environmental destruction. And
John,
naturally,
what is it with what just happened at West Virginia? What department did they just nix at West Virginia?
Which department didn't they nix? I think they had I don't know the whole story there. And I just kind of found out about this West Virginia deal kind of through social media and whatnot. And maybe somebody here at the university had a friend or a colleague there at West Virginia, but they went through all kinds of departments there, and they started cutting jobs left and right. I don't know what the total number of jobs that got cut was, but I mean, it was significant. I mean, there was a whole Twitter thread. I mean, it was trending, I think, on Twitter for some time.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, I got something for you all. This is so every year for the past 2 years, I've gone to the try. This kind of fits into what we've been talking about the bad public image of turfgrass management. And every year I go to the scientific conference. It's the Soil Science Society of America, Crop Science, and Agronomy Science Society of America meetings. Okay. And this year, Kevin Frank, he's with the Michigan State Turf Group. He's been a guy there for, I don't know, years, but he had a poster. And usually it's graduate students and who are doing the poster sessions. You put your research on a poster, and people come by, they look at it, and you talk about it. and you explain to them what you're working on. But as I'm walking through the poster session, I see Kevin. He's a tall dude. He's like 6'3" or 6'4".
My man.
And so I was, yeah. And so can I share my screen with you all? Or is that not a thing that I
no,
can do?
but if you send it to J-Pink, he'll throw it up.
Okay.
So if it's like a link or an image, send
No,
that to
it's a
him
PDF
he'll get
file.
it put up. Perfect.
Let me
Okay,
give me just y'all keep going, and I'll work on sending this to him.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's the thing, and with all this stuff about academia and support and things like that, part of this too that can't be discounted. It's some of this is absolutely a failing of administration, and it's a failing of support within extension programs, teaching programs, research, so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that the money from outside sources for this type of research has all but dried up, right? And from a extension perspective, that makes it much more difficult because there's not enough relevant research, being put forth, and the time is, spread thinner and thinner because, as John said, there's fewer and fewer people to cover an extension requests, site visits, phone calls, emails, samples that get submitted, things like that, and it just makes it very, very tough that you almost have to ignore some stuff. And the thing that we haven't talked about too on the teaching side, and one of the other things that's plaguing a lot of these programs is the fact that they're not getting students, right? And so some have done better than others here as of late. There was definitely a lull, and I think we're seeing some resurgence in certain areas. But the fact of the matter is that the lifeblood of any program is going to be people like John, who are graduate students, right? He's also an employee, but graduate students and undergraduate students, and ultimately, those are things that you're going to get judged on just as much as the publications that you put out, which is a factor of research, and the folks that should be supporting that, right, from a governmental perspective, right, USDA and others that provide research dollars for specialty crops like turf. There is definitely a disdain right now for turf. There's also a disdain within certain segments of golf research, sports turf research, and the like, because there are some hot button issues that seemingly get funded over and over and over again. But some of these new and emerging topics, and that's one thing I'm curious to hear from John after we go through his paper and talk a little bit more. But just some of the new and emerging stuff. Okay, yeah, this is we've talked about this before, guys, and this is a great poster. Go ahead, John.
So y'all have seen this? There's a paper, a peer-reviewed paper that comes along with this.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so obviously
go through it.
Okay. So in 1998, the guys at Michigan State started a lysimeter study on Kentucky bluegrass, and they had a high rate and a low rate. And the high rate was 245 kilograms per hectare, which is 5 pounds. And then the low rate was 196 kilograms, which is 2 pounds of nitrogen per thousand. And if you look on the left there, you have milligrams of nitrate per liter or parts per million, however you want to word that. And then the open circles are that's the high rate. So they had 5 pounds of nitrogen to this Kentucky bluegrass from 1998 to 2003. And remember, 10 milligrams or 10 parts per million nitrate in the water is the EPA limit. And you can see that all of those open circles are well above that 10 parts per million. And as they dropped in 2003, they dropped that lower or the high rate down to 4 pounds per thousand. And then you can see from 2003 on the drop in the nitrate leached out of the Kentucky bluegrass. But okay, now let's look at that low rate, which is 2 pounds. The dark circles is the 2 pounds. There was only 1 year where the average concentration in the leachate was above 5 parts per million with that low rate. So the take-home message from this is, if we apply around that 2 to 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet on our cool season grasses per year, we are as good or better than a natural forest system with regards to capturing nitrogen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
At 4 or 5 pound rate,
Yes.
we're going to lose nitrogen on cool season grasses. We're going to lose nitrogen. But if we're applying around 2 to 3 pounds of nitrogen, there's almost zero difference on a average or a mean than a natural forest system. So
I want to take this. I want to take this a step further. This is great data, right? This is very actionable data.
yes.
Let me ask this:
25 years.
You can't argue it at all. And taking this, why do we not see more implementation of like growth potential modeling to even at a university level or an extension level, or especially what I do not understand are BMPs or recommendations from universities that do not include MLSN? Because I feel like with those two things, especially given that data right there, and that become a foundation for BMPs or recommendations across the entire university landscape, and then followed up with MLSN across the entirety of the university landscape, from a method of interpreting soil tests or decision making that occurs while out in the field, the impact that would have, if
huge.
that was, it's almost hard to wrap my mind around. Where is the fucking gap between the information that I receive as an LCO and how hard and how many years it took me to even find that existed? And it had been around for a large part of my career, and I didn't know it.
Yeah. You have basically touched on exactly why I am studying what I'm studying. So I didn't hear about MLSN until maybe 2016 or 17. And I was only in the golf course business for a couple more years after that. And I was already kind of following something along those lines. I wasn't adding anything but nitrogen, right? But to address your point, DeMay asked about what are the things that I don't like. Red tape is one of the things that I don't like with getting something like that accomplished or fixed in the university system, right? So I have one goal before I leave University of Delaware. Just one. My goal is to change the nutrient recommendations for turfgrass systems from the soil testing lab. And the work that I'm doing now, my research is funded through the USGA. And so I'm going around to golf courses, athletic fields, lawns, parks, everything. And I'm basically doing a soil survey of the entire state. And it's more or less how they came up, how Micah and Wendy and the PACE group came up with MLSN. But I'm doing that only for Delaware.
John, are you trying to verify the numbers that Micah puts forth? Because that is my ongoing debate with John, with him. Okay, that's my ongoing debate with him, is because I'm one of those people where you don't tell me these are the numbers, trust them. I'm not one of those people. Okay, well, it's like before this becomes law, you had better fucking well verify that these are relevant to my situation, and if not, hell no. Okay, I
mean, so here's the problem, though, right? Like, in order to unequivocally claim that that's true, right, is you would have to soil test every single inch of every soil on the face of the earth, right? And that's not reality.
When do we start?
That's never going to happen. Right.
No, that ain't reality. But then, having said that,
Tuesday,
John,
see you next
I'd
Tuesday.
be extremely careful about anybody just taking MLSN and saying this becomes law without verifying it in any fashion. Okay, that is my line in the sand
I'm not
right
even
here.
saying from the standpoint of law, but purely from, okay, like, for example, SLAN.
Recommendations,
or even,
BMPs.
yeah.
Because even a recommendation,
how
guys.
long I chased Albrecht because I had heard from another golf guy who was actually my sales rep that I need to balance my cal to mag ratios. And I was so locked in on it. So locked in. I thought I could unpack. I would have fucking grass growing out of ponds if I just had my calcium to magnesium ratio correctly. I was going to make bent grass look so good with no fans or no nothing in 100-degree weather at 98% humidity, no fungicides, because I had it all figured out with my Albrecht method, right?
Yeah,
but
you had your Cal2Mag, but then
SLAN was talked about in college, and definitely there was no like beat down my throat as far as nutrient management. And then when I got onto the real world, it was a free for all. And if you look at Penn State, for a long time I'm looking at that, especially when I moved into cool season environment. I'm looking at Penn State. Ignore my camera; it keeps overheating. But it was everything had to be 200 parts per million of potassium, right? And then I got into my head that if I dip below 200, my grass is going to die. It's all going to die. I'm growing tall fescue in 90-degree weather with 90% humidity, and it looks as terrible as it does in July. It has nothing to do with the fact that it hadn't rained in 3 weeks or whatever else. It's purely because my potassium dropped below 200. That kind of chaos, I do not understand why we can't agree to have a starting point of somewhere, and why not start at the minimum and work your way out from there? It only makes logical sense.
Yeah, and
and
to
minimums.
To piggyback off that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's
what I'm going to say
that,
is that,
Sorry, go ahead, Ray.
No, yeah. In order, here's my other little concern is that I've seen how quickly a recommendation from a university or some other authority immediately becomes more than just a recommendation. Be careful of that. Be very careful of that. Indeed.
No, the lawmakers are going to look at the universities for their recommendations and then make laws based on that. I get that, right? I think you have something there, right? But I am confident in the MLSN numbers. So
I'm not.
I'm not. What I would like to do.
Well, hang on, let him finish.
What I would like to do is, if with this information that I'm getting going to get from all these soil tests, right? I want to look at that versus MLSN and say, do we maybe need to tweak the phosphorus in Delaware a little bit, or do we maybe need to tweak? I think the MLSN guideline for phosphorus is 21. Well, maybe in Delaware, maybe it needs to be 24 or 27. So just to add a little bit, and here's the thing, even if you put it at 27 or 30, that's still 1.5 times less than the SLAN guidelines.
Yeah.
And so, there is a buffer already built in. There's a 10% buffer built into those numbers. But I'm curious to see if there is what the correlation is, or the comparison between a small area of a sandy peninsula, what that tells us in regards to or compared to MLSN. And I think with that ammo, I will be able to change the nutrient recommendations at the University of Delaware for turfgrass systems, or I hope. And then in the same breath, I have complained multiple times to Micah to please, 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 for the love of God and all things good, please get your paper peer reviewed. Once it's peer reviewed, that's the nail in the coffin for me. And I know people will listen.
I think that's I was going to say, I think that's fair. And I think the other thing too, that as this progresses, right? So like if a lot of the SLAN guidelines, were developed by Ricky Waddington and Caro, right? You go back and you read that text and where all their information came from. And if they had access to what we have now, right? I think they'd be doing similar work to what John's doing, because and I don't think it was anybody's intent. And if you go back and read their book, it's a seminal text in turfgrass science, right? Turfgrass chemicals and soil problems, right? Like, if you don't have that book, you absolutely should. It's 23 years old at this point, 24 years old, something like that. Much of the information though is true and sound, but the point though is that they tried to make is that, you know, they were trying to limit inputs even then, right?
Yeah.
Even when they were expounding upon, at that point, probably 60 or so good years of research to that point that they had on turfgrass and trying to provide some recommendations. The last 20, we've really catapulted forward into some different levels of understanding about, you know, hey, do we need this much? And what is the minimum? Yeah. And I think that minimum, that's the one argument I have with Micah, right? Is that word minimum, I think, incites a lot of perception that it's, oh my gosh, like if I get below this, the turf's going to die. And I don't think that's what he really means by it, or what Wendy and Larry meant to do with it, right? It was merely said as, hey, this is where we need to be to safely be, right, without getting to the floor. And that, I think, is where, just from a language and a marketing perspective, it could be changed. But regardless of that, you know, the semantics aside, what is it about, you know, getting the science wrapped around that at a state level? Here's I guess the question: could there be a peer-reviewed paper before Micah says, "Hey, I'm going to peer review this," right? Could there be a peer-reviewed paper in terms of a process to calibrate and correlate this in a state-by-state basis? Is that what it's going to be?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess mine is going to be the jumping off point. I think Jackie Guevara's done some stuff with MLSN, but I don't know. I've read her paper, but I don't remember kind of the materials and methods and how she did it. I don't know if it was strictly on sand-based root zones or if there was some native soil mixed in there. But I'm doing a mix of everything. So I'm using sand, native soil, you know, anything wherever there's grass growing and it's good performing turf. I'm sampling it. So like, I don't have like this great idea. I'm not like this amazing scientist, but I want to try to expand on this good science that's happened before me to make significant change, and significant change for the better, especially as far as the image of the industry goes.
I think the other thing, and Ray, I wonder if a lot of this is where you're going, is that, okay, Ray, if your concern is about MLSN being used for adoption of what you have to maintain, that if you're over 21 parts per million of phosphorus, you know, you're going to hell kind of thing. We're going to revoke your license. Yeah. Or, you know, is 21 parts per million going to be applicable across fine fescue, tall fescue, celebration, Bermuda, latitude 36, iron cutter, so on and down. Every cultivar, is it going to fall into that same thing? Is that your fear of adoption? Is that it'll be forced in that way, and then and it hasn't been correlated or tested across?
Yeah, there's no correlation, and yet at the same time, me as the operator, I'm forced to tell people the same thing that I was told regarding another matter, where your numbers are this, get bent. Okay? Because your phosphorus is here, yet your turf looks like shit. And you know, in my business, people give no damns about numbers. All they know is that their grass doesn't look right, and you're responsible.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and I think part of that too is that if it was easier to approach, right? So say you know you're at 31 parts per million and you've got purple turf. What a great opportunity for a university to get involved at that point, right? And maybe bridging that gap to make that a reality, and an easier phone call to make. How do I get a hold of? Who do I get a hold of? You know, how long is it going to take for them to come out there? I feel like if there was more of a concerted effort in that way, where, and I'll put it like this, and I think part of that onus does fall on the responsibility of the applicator too. I do not want to pass that on. it's kind of like when you have, and I'll talk about it from this standpoint just because in business now, but when you have a line of credit through a bank, right? You can go about it two ways, right? You're a customer of that bank. You can put them to work for you and be in constant communication with them and ask them for every available tool that they have available to business owners that have a line of credit with them and absolutely use the holy shit out of them to ensure your success. Or you can hide and bury your head in the sand and hope to God they never call you, they never find you, they never talk to you, and just stay away from them, right? And I still feel like there's a bit of that. It's like when the pesticide inspectors come around, right? You go. I can't tell you the number of guys that I have talked to that said, "Man, my pesticide inspector comes around. I tell him get the fuck off my property." I'm like, "What?" That's the first thing you have to say to him. Versus when they come to mind, I'm like, "Man, you want a bourbon? Like, can we just hang out for a little bit? Let me get to know you. Are you married? You got kids? You know, I'm Southern and chatty, right? So it's kind of my approach, right? But again, I think part of that is bridging the gap between either extension or academia and LCOs, and making them feel like they're an asset for your business, right? And I think a lot of that is just an LCO mentality that has to change. And I don't think that purely falls on the responsibility of the university at all. But
I mean, I give out my cell phone number to anybody. Say, look, no, it's a terrible idea, but like that's how I feel about it. Like, call me if there's something you don't know, or there's something you need clarification on, or there's some idea that you have and you want to know if it's worth a damn. Please call me. I'd rather you call me before you go out and do it.
Well, that's what it takes. It takes people that, again, are going to help try to make others better and everything like that. In any industry, any walk of life, the most dangerous person is the one that is either too conceited, too not humble enough to ask the question of asking for help. And to Matt's point,
I don't have the answer. I don't have the answers. Yeah, I don't have the answers for everything, and I'm quick to tell someone I don't know, but let me get back to you. I can find out.
Yeah. There you go, or connect them with the right person, and and don't be the guy that wants to tell the pesticide inspector that he's gonna have to take that Q4 out of your cold dead fingers if he comes on your property again.
I'm gonna spray.
You can have it, brother.
Till the day I die. You can S my D. I am a big fan of Orthane. I want to make that very clear. I love acetate. I have sprayed metric shit tons of it.
You mentioned a couple other people. You mentioned Kevin Frank, Jackie Guevara. You mentioned some others. So this is the part of the show where you're the you're the rock star, and you need to tell us what records you're listening to right now. So either what topics and or what researchers out there right now are like, what's in your Spotify playlist, so to speak, of turf research?
As far as what I listen to in podcasts,
yeah, like what you. No, it can. I'm not
just
saying
research you
podcasts,
read, researchers
papers,
you follow.
People that you think are interesting right now that are looking into cool stuff, even if it's not even related to your stuff, but it's in turf somehow.
I don't even care if it's not in turf.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best follows on green industry Twitter is Andrew McGuire. He's a great follow. He's fantastic.
Man. At Agronomist Ag, I have a hard on for that guy. I would not divorce my wife and marry him, but I sure as shit would take him out for dinner and drinks.
Yeah. He's I like what he does, even though it's not really turf related, but it's still it's plant related and soil related. So that interests me. And some of the stuff he talks about has some carryover into our industry.
Yes.
But one person I wish was more active on Twitter is Doug Soldat. I think Doug Soldat is one of the. I mean, I don't want to like. He's one of my turfgrass heroes. I think he's one of the sharpest individuals I've ever met, and I think he's done some of the best work since I've been having to study and read these types of things. I like what he does. Gosh, man, there's just so many people. Mike Richardson has done a lot of good work at the University of Arkansas, and there's a lot of young graduate students that are doing a lot of good work too. I wish I was better on Twitter. and I wish I posted more. But I'm just terrible at that. I mean, I'm 40. How old am I? 43, and no, I'm 44. So, yeah,
You can't
I hear you.
starting to
I
run
hear you.
together.
can't even verify his age for Twitter, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And I'm usually older than most of my professors, or at least about the same age. But anyways, yeah. So like, I think I really like Doug, and of course I like what Micah does. I really think that he's got the right approach to turfgrass management, especially in the golf course world, because that's my background. You know, that's my real bread and butter. But I like all turfgrass. But yeah, Doug, I don't know. There's Beth Gertall. She's fantastic, but she's
Yep.
retired.
Yep.
Beth retired. When did she retire?
Last year.
Yeah, almost a year ago now.
Lord have mercy.
She works
End
for
of fall.
what is that? What is that program called? It's something aid that goes around to countries
USAID.
and helps. I think USAID. I think that's who she's
Yeah.
working for, doing some work down in Haiti. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I know
My
she's working in
God.
Haiti, but I'm not sure if it's for USAID. But oh man, I don't want to be that guy and open up my Twitter and see who I follow. But
Go
No,
ahead.
it's okay. I'm just always curious of,
oh, I got one. I got one.
Okay.
Carl Scamenti at University of Cornell. He's
Oh,
a
yeah.
extension specialist, and he's done a lot of really good work there. With Frank Rossi, they've really done a great job implementing MLS into the state of New York and the Cornell Extension Service. And they've done it in a way where it's like, yeah, slant is great, it's good, and
Hang on.
Yeah.
So they've implemented
I knew that was coming.
MSLN without verifying that those numbers are good in the context outside of golf. This is my specific issue.
right.
Golf turf and landscape turf are entirely different worlds. I don't need to explain that to you, right?
No,
And
I understand.
And I look at landscape turf as being in a different world where with golf turf, at the end of the day, as long as the turf is playable, it is acceptable. But in landscape turf, there are standards regarding aesthetic appearance that need to be maintained.
Yeah.
And maintained relatively consistently. So we're talking about two different contexts.
Let me ask you
what
this,
caught my
John.
attention.
I
Is
still
the-
think, and I'm sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
No. I was going to ask is for John to talk a little bit about how big of a role, because we're seeing this in golf a little bit, and I know it's there's a little bit of work going on at Ohio State right now on this, on looking at newer cultivars, right, that are going to potentially need less fertilizer, have been bred that way, have different genetic colors, things like that, right, that maybe they do look better at lower rates than what are traditionally. So how do we solve for that in this whole process that you're developing? What is it, and I guess it's probably just iterating and replicating that process over and over again as we bring new genetics into the market, right?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think that's going to be one of our avenues to get to genetics and breeding are going to be one of the main ways in which we get to a more sustainable industry.
Sure.
Or an industry that requires less inputs. Because
cool.
I have I've got 5 cultivar trials. 3 of them are INTEP. One of them's a certified turf breeders trial, and one of them's a private trial with centipede grass. Actually, I got centipede grass growing in Delaware. So, anyways, I can talk about that later.
Wow.
So I've got all of these cultivar trials. I've got a fine fescue, a tall fescue, a fine fescue INTEP trial, a tall fescue INTEP trial, and I just seeded the Kentucky bluegrass, the INTEP Kentucky bluegrass trial last fall. So this will be the first full season of it. But in my small amount of time, having these cultivar trials that are replicated 3 times, they have older varieties of these cultivars mixed in with these newer varieties. So the gap between in turfgrass quality, the gap in brown patch resistance and dollar spot resistance, the gap between cultivars that are only 15 or 20 years old to the cultivars that are in these INTEP trials now that are new is greater than at any point in the turfgrass breeding history. I mean, these things are unbelievable. They have darker green color. Some of these tall fescues look like freaking Kentucky bluegrass. And they have that dark green color. And I have a picture. I should have. I thought about this before I came on. I was like, I need this picture. But there was a plot that it was middle of July. And if you're familiar with the Mid-Atlantic, middle of July is brown patch buffet, right? On tall fescue. And we have this new cultivar that is a high performer in the latest tall fescue INTEP trials, right next to an older generation. Like when I say older generation, I mean like maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago maximum.
A Falcon 4 or something like that.
Yes. The older generation was tore up. I mean, it was maybe 60% brown patch coverage on that 5x5 plot. And the one right next to it that was a new generation had 0 brown patch, 0. And, that's an anecdote, but the data, if you go to INTEP and look at the data, it's there. It tells you how good these things are. And that's that's a tip of the hat to the turfgrass breeders and the turfgrass breeding programs around the country. But these things are they are phenomenal. And they hold their dark green color way into the winter, and they green up earlier. They just require less inputs in general. And so I think that's going to be our biggest step forward towards a sustainable industry, or lowering inputs, if you will.
John?
Yeah, genetics are the name of the game.
Yeah, genetics are kind of it, because for me, like what I advocate for is any kind of problematic or high maintenance turf or high input turf. My first advice to people is, or what I first ask them is, how much are you married to this grass? That's my first question to them, actually. How much do you love this grass? Because my suggestion to you is to get rid of it.
Yes.
Don't have
this grass. That's a tough pill to swallow. That's a tough pill to swallow and to sell.
No, but that's what I tell people. Don't have this grass. Don't have it. Because the way I tell them is, if you are sold this grass on the basis of this being some wonderful thing, I'm sorry, sir or ma'am, you are scammed. You are scammed. I mean, I'll just put it to you that way. And this also, relates to how it would be possible for turfgrass to maintain on lower nutrient levels. I agree. However, what I'm well aware of is that, a lot of the legacy varieties, they don't do very well on those low nutrient programs. They seem to need more.
Yeah.
To look commercially acceptable. Would you agree?
No, I completely agree with that statement, Ray. I think I didn't know how significant it was until I started managing these INTEP
doing
trials.
It yourself. Yeah.
And I have another perfect example. So I built a putting green / tee. It's not mowed at putting green height, but I mowed it at 0.200, right? So
Tee height.
it's
Okay, good.
yeah, it's tee height or fairway height, whatever, maybe a little shorter than fairway. But anyways, and it's one of the newer varieties. It's Chinook, and that was developed by the Rutgers Group. And looking back in the NTAP trials with Chinook in it, it was in the top 1% performers, right? And I've had it for 2 full growing seasons going into the 3rd, and I've never had a dollar spot on it, on a bent grass.
Dang.
So I've
Wow.
applied fungicides 3 times. I got Watea patch the first year, and I got a little bit of brown patch, or a little bit of brown patch later in the season. And I've applied fungicides 3, maybe 4 times in 3 years, and I've still never had dollar spot.
Okay, let me ask you this about that same bent grass. How nitrogen and iron hungry is that same bent grass? Because here's what I understand about the legacy bent varieties. They need 3 things in abundant quantities in order to be acceptable. 1, fungicides, 2, nitrogen, 3, iron. How is this new variety doing, aside from the fungicides? Because I also am familiar with this concept of, with the legacy varieties, once you get them below a certain iron and nitrogen level, they then become that much more disease susceptible. So what's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, I only have that one variety, but I have managed
Mhm.
L93 bent grass, and
God bless
also,
L93. If that doesn't make you want
yeah,
to
I mean,
shoot yourself.
so here's another comparison I like to make, just to as a side note. So everybody remembers in the early 2000s or late 90s when L93 came on, and the distance between pin cross or the pin varieties and L93, that distance right there,
Mm.
right? So
Yes.
in terms of turf grass quality and inputs needed, dollar spot resistance, etc., that gap between L93 and the new cultivars of creeping bentgrass, I would say, is double or triple. I mean, that's how good these newer varieties of grasses, not just bentgrass, but all of them. I think the
Mhm.
only species of grass that is lacking would be the fine fescues. There's just not there's people are, uh, I don't know if the intensity of research dollars is on the same level with fine fescue
Yeah.
as it is with the Bermudas and the zoysias and the bents and the tall fescues and the ryegrasses. But I think people are really starting to take notice that fine fescues could use a heavy, intense, some breeding efforts. But I got sidetracked. What was I talking about with Ray? I lost my train of thought.
Okay, what we were talking
It happens
about
with Ray.
was, how has this Chinook
How hungry
bentgrass
are they?
performed under
Oh yeah, okay.
a reduced input program? I mean, that's what I'm kind of like drilling into, because you see, it's one thing to strive towards lower inputs. It's another thing to have grasses that deliver at those lower input levels, because you see, if we can have grasses that survive and look commercially acceptable on lower inputs, so be it. Sign me up. I'm all for it. I'll get the bulldozer right now and put all the poor performing, needy legacy varieties in the trash can where they belong. I'll do it.
Yeah, I think the inputs or the requirement. So I think creeping bentgrass is a bit of a different animal because um, it's okay. So let me back up here. I'm getting myself confused, but I think the creeping bentgrasses, they in my experience, I've managed a couple different varieties, and then I have this new generation, and
Mm-hmm.
the density of the turf when it's at its peak. You go in there first week of June, last week of May, and you compare that to an older variety. It looks good, and I don't like. last year I only applied around a quarter pound of nitrogen, I think, maybe 0.3 pounds of nitrogen
Hot damn.
to this surface, and it was almost all with compost. And so
Really?
yeah, and it's just they're so good. They're so good. The surface is good. It's firm. It's funny. I pulled off one of the stolons that was kind of creeping out into the surrounding tall fescue around this putting green. The density of the nodes was I thought it was a Bermuda grass, and it could have been mistaken for a Bermuda grass if you didn't know different, because the node density of this Chinook, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. That's one of those things where I should have taken a picture and put it on Twitter.
John, I'm actually visualizing this because remember now, I'm familiar with extremely low cut Bermuda and seashore paspalum. Yeah. That's my area of familiarity. So if you tell me that bent grass can perform under low inputs, then that is something into the future. And likewise, I myself notice a difference between, say, the legacy varieties of Bermuda and the newer varieties that have come out in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I notice a huge difference because with the legacy varieties, in order for those varieties to be commercially acceptable, can you all say a half a pound to a pound of nitrogen per month? Where
I mean, I've heard it.
No, but whereas with the legacy with the new varieties, tenth of a pound per month is more than enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is in a 12-month growing season.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, these newer varieties, they're just good all the way around. They're good with the nitrogen response. They're good with color retention. They're good with density, texture, you name it. Winter hardiness. They're just really, everybody hates the price tag of these new varieties, right? The price tag. I always tell people you're going to get what you pay for when it comes to genetics, right? And if you don't spend that money, you're going to end up paying for it double in the future.
John,
it's going to come out of you somewhere else. It's going to come out of you somewhere else, right?
Cost alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the longest time sod growers in Ohio has a great quote, and you can share this with your extension folks. The most expensive turf grass supply you'll ever buy is cheap seed.
I wholeheartedly agree.
So you can summarize it like that. You can chase it with water, you can chase it with chem, you can chase it with fert, and you'll kick yourself down the road. And you only get most turf grass managers, whether it's a lawn, a sports field, golf course, maybe get one chance, very seldom two chances to change genetics in a one shot wholesale way. So no, I was curious about that genetics program or that genetics question. I brought that up because I don't know, I'm very interested to see how your paper turns out. No pressure, seriously, but like I think that process of of putting these things through their paces, right? So that we do know, hey, not only more specifically within the state of Delaware, but if you have a midnight type bluegrass that is one of these cultivars, your numbers might be a little bit higher. Or if you have a perennial ryegrass, it might be a little bit lower. Whatever the case might be, right? Those things help hone in, and so I don't know. I think it's really, really cool what you're doing.
Well, I mean that's the thing. It's like I'm not doing anything groundbreaking or novel, right? Like going out and taking soil tests is monotonous, and a lot of people just don't like doing it. And so that's why there's not a lot of recent research with that type of stuff. And I kind of volunteered myself. I was like, well, this stuff is going to be valuable in some form or fashion. So, why not do it? And the USGA was nice enough to give me some money to do it. And hopefully I get a worthwhile paper out of it and a master's degree.
Well, but here's the thing, John, is that listen, not everybody needs to be doing this groundbreaking research that had this novel thought that came and changed the world. I believe that some of the most important and impactful researchers are the connectors, right? Because how many research papers do you read where the conclusion says, we suggest that these, open-ended questions that we've, discovered through our field research or laboratory research should be investigated further, and it's just left in this open-end format, right?
Yeah.
I think
I can't tell you how
replicating some
many.
of that and connecting that is important.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many papers I've read in the past couple years that had that exact quote at the very end. Needs to be or warrants further investigation.
I think it's a
lot of
prereq
times
since 2020. Pretty much everything I've read since 2020 ends in that. I don't know if I've ever read differently, as a matter of fact, in the last 3 years.
But I mean, that's a good problem to have, right? That means there's more questions to be answered.
And that's the thing, science is never finished, right?
Absolutely.
But
Sure.
I think that to take those steps forward, right, somebody needs to take some of those good ideas, put them into practice and say, okay, yeah, can we validate this? And is there a system that we can come up with? So I applaud your efforts. Don't ever apologize for not having something novel or groundbreaking or anything like that. You're doing very important work, and you should be commended for it. So, and if anybody wants to talk down into it, please give them my number, and I'll tell them to go fuck off.
My cell phone number is area code 90. Why again? Follow
The only reason we're doing that too is so we can get the
hooting your
go ahead,
horn
go ahead.
here. Of course, why did both Ray and my mics drop at the same time? Or
I
cameras?
don't know. While you're
Is
out
that-
though, I'm just going to say, only reason I want them to call me is so I can take their phone number and write it in every men's restroom stall between here and Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Just don't
That's
do it
all I
at
need.
Buc-ee's because they will erase it at Buc-ee's. I learned that the hard way. No, what I was going to say is that it's so the lack of cohesion between universities is what absolutely chaps my ass. Even though they can all be talking about Fine Fescue, they all can be talking about big wrestling. It's just there's no cohesion, right? And I feel like some of that has got to be reined in to a degree because it's you're being inundated with so much different shit without a general agreed upon basis. And there needs to be some sort of fucking starting point that people can all look at and agree and say, here we are, this is where we're going to begin, and then we can go out from here. And I so many of the questions I get asked, and Demand, we were talking about this the other day where we saw someone ask this question, and it was like, I see, Micah recommend this. I see NC State University recommend this. I see Penn State recommend that. I see Texas A&M recommend this. What the fuck is the truth? And it's like, man, why can't we just have a starting point and just go from there?
Here's the most important. Oh, go ahead.
The red tape in academia to get things accomplished is at times frustrating, right? And if for example, in my situation where I want to change the nutrient recommendations that our soil tests and our extension service puts out. So in order to get this done, not only do I have to have some data, which will hopefully be the data that I have that supports some kind of change, but then I'm going to have hopefully Micah's data, and then Jackie's data, and then whoever else, Doug Soldet's data, whoever's data. Like, it requires all of this peer-reviewed stuff in order to make changes with that type of with the nutrient recommendations. And so that is the part that I don't like, is that there's a lot of hoops and a lot of red tape in order to get things done. But at the same breath, I understand why that is, because they don't want to put out BS information that can be a black eye to the university down the line. So,
but at this point, it looks like BS. It genuinely looks like bullshit right now. So I don't think it's going to get worse from that standpoint. Another point I was going to ask is that what are the roadblocks you run into when shooting for peer review? I don't know anything about that process. Say
Well,
you
honestly,
have a piece of work and you want to get it peer review. What does that look like?
honestly, like this is my first time going through it too, doing a project, getting data, and then like this is all new for me too. But I know another hurdle to the peer review process is the price. It can be quite expensive to get it peer reviewed. And
Man.
uh, I don't know, maybe $1,500, $2,000. But somebody has to pay for those reviewers' time. Um, I don't know the entire process yet because I'm going through it for my first time. So I tell you what, why don't you have me back on in about, I don't know, 12 to 18 months, and I'll give you the lowdown on it.
Yes, we will. Because I'm sure I'll have something to shout about then.
Oh, and then we can also ask too. I mean, this is the most important question tonight. I mean, what are you going to do for your PhD?
No,
No, you're not going to become a
no
tenured
PhD.
professor.
No, I honestly I don't know what I'm going to do, but the I quite like my job now. But that doesn't mean when I finish I'll be open. I'm open to look for something else that may be appealing. But I'm pretty happy in the current situation I'm in because it's really cool. So, I work with the nutrient management program, and so I have to, when in Delaware, the nutrient management program, we have classes that we teach, and then we give a test, right? We teach you about
Mhm.
proper nutrient management, BMPs, and then you take a test, and then you pass the test, and you're certified. And then I work with the pesticide safety program, so I provide people with how to calibrate spreaders, how to properly read a label. So if I just do if I fulfill a couple requirements with the nutrient management program and the pesticide safety program, I provide continuing education opportunities for people to keep those license. If I meet those requirements, then I have the freedom to do whatever I want with regards to that fits in the scope of my job. So I've got a lot of freedom there, and I quite like that. I mean, I'm able to start a little turf grass facility, so um, that's been quite good here. And I don't see myself trying to shoot for a PhD at the moment. Because man, look, I don't have kids. I have a unique story. I started in the industry. I worked my way up, became a superintendent, and then I said, nah, that's not what I want. And I went to graduate school, took a pay cut, became an extension agent. Like, I don't have kids. I'm married, but I don't have kids. Like, not many people in their 40s can do that, right? So, like, it's the way I kind of got to where I am is pretty unique. But at the same time, I'm also 40 something, and I don't know if I can handle the full time job plus the rigors of trying to get a PhD. But at this moment, that's not in the cards.
It's fair. I
All right.
just I had to ask the question.
One more and then we'll wrap this up. So compost. And Ray, if you're listening, earmuffs, because Ray will absolutely lose his mind. I think he's already on edge as it is. Compost, when selecting a compost, and so I know you're a big advocate of it and a big fan of it. When
Yeah.
selecting a compost, are all compost created equal? And when you're trying to choose one, what do you specifically look for to get your biggest ROI?
So no, not all composts are created equal, but there's a laundry list of criteria that you need to look for. And typically, the first step I recommend for somebody looking to use compost, um, whether you're going to incorporate it prior to establishment or you're going to do some kind of top dressing program with it, is there is a national governing body called the National Compost Producers. There's a national governing body, and I can't think of the name off the hand. But if you go to their website, and it's a shame I can't think of it, but if you just Google National Compost Producers Association or something along those lines.
Is it the U.S. Composting Council, the STA, Certified Compost Participants?
Yeah, that's it. So if you go there, they have a map of the United States where you can buy compost. And in order to be listed on their website, there's quality control measures and that these producers have to meet. If you buy from any of those people on that map, I would feel confident. There you go. I would feel confident that you're going to get a pretty good product from any of those people. But if Joe Billy down the street says, "Oh yeah, I got some compost," and then you pull up to the compost and it's got Canadian thistle growing out of it and poa annua, that's probably not a good start. But yeah, there's a lot to consider with compost, and I know I guess we're trying to wrap up here, but Pete Landscoot at University of Pennsylvania has a really nice fact sheet on considerations for compost, if for those who are interested.
Yeah, I think where
let's start with the map.
I see a lot of people make mistakes because they'll think they're buying compost, and then when you look at the analysis on it, it's like a 620 or whatever, and you're like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
And then they go put it down at 1.5 inches, and funny things start to happen. I have gotten, like, one of the things I learned the hard way is that I used to use a ton of the compost from Monterey Mushroom, and I remember I had gotten a load one time, and immediately after I got it, went and put it out. And the property that I did, it killed all 10,000 square feet of it. And I was like, holy shit, what happened? And so then going back, I found out the sodium levels in the compost were extremely high. And so it ended up salt burning everything, right? And but what I found was that I could store it outside in open air and then push it into a compost bin, right? But let it get a couple of rains on it, leach any remaining sodium, push it into my compost bin, then go use it. And it was awesome. I mean, still, all the compost I use from Monterey Mushroom was one of the best that I've ever used. Anyway, I just brought it up to say is that, I firmly agree with you. I think it is good. And I also think that LCOs should take advantage of it more often, especially if you're in the volume lawn care game and you're trying to figure out a way to be a differentiator to cut fertilizer costs. I think that is probably the best tool that's available, especially if you have like an 8-month growing season and you're doing 8 rounds of fertilizer and you want to try and maximize every available time that you have on that property to keep it looking absolutely mint. You could probably cut out a lot of the time that you're spending money and time on fertilizer and dedicate it to either weed control or scouting or whatever it is that you can do better, adjusting irrigation heads, than just slinging a bag of 2505 and hoping for the best sort of deal. So I think that is important. I'm glad you touched on where to at least start looking for quality compost, because that, I think, is also the second hiccup that people run into.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts, John. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if somebody does, salt concentrations in compost are going to vary by producer and by source material. So for those who do buy or end up buying a compost that does have a high salt content, the cool thing about salt is that it moves with water. So if you have a good product that's really salty, pound the water as soon as you apply it, and just like all other salts, it's going to go through the profile. But you got to get the water on it as soon as you put it down.
There's a caveat.
Closing thoughts. Do what?
Is that if you have a soil that retains salts very well, be extremely cautious of introducing anything, and I mean anything, that contains salt to it, because good freaking luck getting that salt to move back out of that soil once you put it there.
Yeah.
That's just my only caveat to that statement.
I think that's a good caveat.
Ray, I was going to say that when you dipped off, I was hoping you're still listening because I asked you to put on earmuffs when the compost conversation came up. Anyway,
I heard it anyway, man. I heard it anyway, man. I heard it anyway,
John,
and that was my why.
Give us some closing thoughts. Where do we follow you on Twitter? I'm going to put the responsibility on you right now, very publicly. Please be more active on Twitter. And I promise everyone listening now will engage with you in the best ways. But your closing thoughts.
Let me give me one second here.
Look at this.
I'm looking for my Sharpie, or I'm not my Sharpie, but my dry erase marker, and I was going to put that's my to-do list right here. I'll post on Twitter more on my to-do list.
Please do.
I think it's UDTurfGuy is my handle. And I think that's my handle on the Discord server too, isn't it? Or is it not?
It is.
Yeah. So closing thoughts. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. This was cool. I'll come back in the future, and if you want me, and
absolutely,
I'll be happy to update you on what I find with my project here. Other closing thoughts: calibrate frequently and often.
Remember, yes. Money saved is money saved. Calibrate your fucking equipment. Thank you seriously for coming on. We are going to have you back on, and we'll probably hound the holy shit on you to have you more often than you want to be, because we barely scratched the surface tonight in 2.5 hours, and I guarantee you we could go for another 7.
Man, I just looked at the time. And it's 11:30.
I know.
What happens when you get some guys talking grass, man?
Yeah, no, this was good. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for listening. Again, go follow him on Twitter at UDTurfGuy. Give him some love. Shout nice things at him. Pay attention to what he writes, and all that other stuff. And of course, keep up to date with the project that he has going on, because that's something that's going to be applicable to all of us, no matter what segment of the industry we're in. Thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good one. But